I'm going to lead right into a story. So let's do this. Or not. Okay. September 20th, 1991. Andrea Gale left the port of Gloucester, Massachusetts, for the Grand Banks of Newfoundland. The plan was to catch swordfish and return in about a month or so. Not long after, the ship arrived in Grand Banks and realized there wasn't a lot of fish, swordfish, that is. Then, October 29th, 40 days after their extended fishing trip, 3 devastating storms converged. One being a hurricane, Hurricane Grace, sending waves as high as 100 feet, smashing into this boat, into this vessel, with winds up to 145, maybe 150 kilometers per hour. Of the 6 men on board of this boat, of this vessel, none of them made it home. Their plan was to go home. If they're from Boston, maybe their plan was to go home to catch the Bruins game. That was for Nathaniel Wood out there. Maybe watch Ray Bourque play. For some of you that weren't born yet, he may mean nothing to you, but that's okay. But anyways, in life, as we know, plans change. That's the story of life as I'm discovering with my life that plans change. The highs and lows of life, the home runs in life, the walks, the strikeouts, the grand slams, the touchdowns and the fumbles in life. Today, we're going to read the story of Naomi and Ruth. Ruth chapter 1. And in 1991, with this vessel, with this crew of 6, just like Ruth, it's a story of how do you continue to trust in loss, tragedy, and grief. So this story, I'm filled with hope, and I hope you are too, that in this book, in Naomi and in Ruth, in chapter 1, that it will give you insight, just like it's given me. So, this is new, what translation is this? This is going to be the NET, New English Translation. So if you have a Bible or a phone, I encourage you to take a look, and we'll read it together. I'm going to drink out of my Manly Stanley, as my girls call it, Manly Stanley. Never used to be a fan of them, and then I got hooked, and now I'm drinking water all the time, which is a good thing. Okay, here we go. Now, verse 1, Ruth chapter 1. Now, it came about in the days when the judges governed, and there was a famine in the land. And a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to reside in the land of Moab with his wife and 2 sons. The names were Elimelech and his wife Naomi. The 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. Now, I enjoy people laughing. I do that, so I don't want to default, but I just got to say this. If I was living in the Old Testament, I would want the name Chilion. Why? The nickname would be so cool. Chili, you know? That went nowhere. Wah, wah, shoot. Okay. Thank you. I got one. Okay. But let's go back. Thank you. There. That's good. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So they entered the land. So this family enters a new land. The time of Judges. This was a tumultuous, time for 200 years. This was in 1200 to 1000 BC. This was after the death of Joshua to the first king of Saul. And it was characterized by this cyclical pattern, kind of like the recycle logo. It was sin and idolatry, oppression from enemies, repentance, the deliverance of a charismatic leader, and then so on, sin, oppression, being saved again. Without a central king, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. It was a free-for-all. on top of that, on top of this political landscape of kind of chaos and uncertainty, was a famine, shortage of food, and just hunger, and what that does to, what it does when we don't eat. Famine, the political landscape, converged into a perfect storm of uncertainty. This family was desperate. They had to change. There's a quote you may know: desperate times calls for desperate measures. Decisions had to be made. Verse 2, then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died. She was left with her 2 sons, and they took themselves Moabite women as wives, one Orpah, the other Ruth. And they lived in this land for 10 years. Then both Mahlon and Chilion also died. And this woman, Naomi, was left without her 2 sons and her husband. When I was 18 years old, I couldn't tell you how my life was going to be. I know it's obvious for us here. But this family did not expect this at all. Not one loved one died, but 2. This was like a relational, emotional, spiritual, perfect storm of grief. What's the definition of grief? I had to look it up. Johns Hopkins Medicine says this: grief is what you feel when you lose someone or something dear to you. I think God's made us to express our emotions and feelings. Grief is a natural human response. God's made it that way. But sometimes grief can have different reactions. And while I share this, I'm no expert at all. Many of you in this room have experienced grief. And as I share, if there's emotions that are brought up, stay close with him. And I might have some emotions too. So, what could Naomi and Ruth and Orpah be experiencing after the loss of 3 family members? Some symptoms of grief, according to Johns Hopkins, is this: physical symptoms, lack of energy, headaches, upset stomach, maybe excessive sleeping. Some emotional symptoms could be that they're experiencing, could be memory lapses, inability to concentrate, irritability. I confess there's a lot of these that I've checked off over the last few years, which I'll share briefly about in my life. Depression, extreme anger, or feeling resigned. Some spiritual symptoms. Sometimes you can feel closer to God in that, or feelings of anger or outreach towards God. Sometimes a symptom can be strengthening of faith or questioning of faith. Often symptoms have reactions, don't they? Sometimes it's in the public. Sometimes it's in the private, in the silence. And these grief reactions can be complex, can't they? Can depend on your personality, maybe your spiritual beliefs, how you were raised, your cultural background. Maybe some of you aren't Canadian, or for me, I grew up, my father was Swedish and had a Swedish way about him. My mom was very outgoing, and it was just, many of you have your own stories of your backgrounds. And some of those reactions include shock, depression, feeling panic, guilt, anger. And that can be difficult, as many of you know. It's difficult to navigate those storms, but there is hope. Naomi and Ruth had to change. I just turned to the wrong page. Hold on one second. Navigating the times of those storms, and for me, the last 3 years in particular, We recently had some work done on our house, and there was a carpenter, and his heart meant well, but he had seen our family go through quite a bit of loss, from saying goodbye to a father, friend. And he said, man, your life is like the story of Job. And I know he meant well. I'm just glad he brought up the Bible, to tell you the truth. And he probably saw some of my reactions that I just described. But there's hope. Over these last many years, just reading the Bible and how the Holy Spirit shares with us about real life examples in the Bible. And those real life examples and documented stories in the Bible about people navigating loss and grief, like Job. One of my favorites, David with his commander, Abner. Beautiful story. Lamentations, where Israelites lose their country, the destruction of their temple, their home, their place of worship to the Babylonians. We see reactions of loss on the cross with the two people beside Jesus. And I love there on, Jesus is a man acquainted with sorrow. And he looks down and he sees his mom, and I think this is beautiful. And he says, hey, John, look after my mom. And of course, this book of Naomi and Ruth. So, let's continue on. Verse 6. So how is Naomi and Ruth going to navigate this all? Then she arose with her daughter-in-laws to return to the land of Moab, because she had heard that the Lord had visited his people and gave them food. I'll be honest, I'm not sure at the time if there was still famine 10 years later. But when you're so desperate and there's converging traumatic events coming together, I don't know about you, but one looks for a glimmer of hope, a lifeline. You're desperate. Maybe they're thinking maybe just a visitation of the Lord. Or simply, maybe there's more food. Desperate times calls for desperate measures. It was like a Hail Mary. Not so much the type of prayer, but like the football play. I'm looking at a friend here who knows football very well, and I too know a little bit about football, not NFL, more CFL. But a Hail Mary is this. When you're down and out in a team that's fourth quarter, a Hail Mary is roughly 50 yards or more, and your chances are slim. And so the quarterback just chucks that football in hopes, not crossing my fingers, in hopes. You didn't see that, did you? No. That the receiver will catch it. 1984, there was a guy roughly documented my height, 5'10". His name was Doug Flutie. And doing some research, it might have been, actually he was smaller, maybe 5'8", 5'6". And it was a college game, Boston College versus the Miami Hurricanes. And the Miami Hurricanes were the defending national champions. So little Doug Flutie, who became an awesome quarterback for my Calgary Stampeders in the CFL. Haven't watched it in years, though, but that's okay. So this kind of David guy just chucks this thing. Time 0 left on the clock. And not only goes 50 kilometers, wow, it had been past 50 yards, it goes 64 yards. And who catches it? His roommate. Naomi and Ruth, they're looking for their Hail Mary. They heard that maybe God visited back home and gave food. So they departed. Naomi with her 2 daughter-in-laws, and they went back and returned from the land of Judah. That would have been roughly Centerville to downtown Halifax, roughly 95 kilometers. I don't know if they had horses. I don't know if they I have no idea. But that's roughly 27 straight hours of walking. So let's break it up. 3 days of walking with some rest in there. And imagine that trip. Not only just the baggage and the emotional weight of losing one, but three. So let's continue on. Verse 8. But Naomi said to her daughters, "Go, return to your mother's house. May the Lord deal with you kindly, with you as you have dealt with me and the dead, the ones that have passed. May the Lord grant you and find you a place of rest, each in the house of your husband." Then she kissed them, and they raised their voices and wept. However, Orpah and Ruth said, "No, we will return with you and to your people." Saying goodbye is never easy, is it? Verse 11. But Naomi said, "Return." So one more go around. After they wept. I don't know about you, but sometimes, I don't know about you, but just heavy crying, it just feels like all the energy gets sucked out, and I'm not sure if that's how Naomi felt. But so one more round of this conversation. Naomi says, "No, return, my daughters. Why should you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb that they may be your husbands, like in the future? Return, my daughters. Go. I am too old to have a husband. If I said I had hope, if I had had a husband tonight and give birth to sons, would you therefore wait until they were grown up? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is much more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has come out against me." This is a very, very real conversation. Some scholars that I've been reading, it's a common belief in the Old Testament where God's sovereignty is acknowledged in both blessings and in trials. This is a trial. Naomi, she attributes her loss to this divine intervention. But what also she's doing, Naomi, is she's naming out her loss. She's voicing it. God did this. She's tired. No word salad here. Verse 13 here comes from a deep, vulnerable place, a deep of loss and grief. Yes, sometimes, not all people, but sometimes. There's no judgment here. When you're at your worst, in the bottom of the barrel, you may have the thought or you may have the feelings that God did this, whether it's true or not. I'm not here to say that this morning. But Naomi voiced it. She named it. Verse 14. And they raised their voices again and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, and Ruth clung to her. The Hebrew word is cleave. Naomi is about to have a reality of another loss, and that is her daughter-in-law of 10 years. That's four people now. Saying goodbye. Verse 15. Then she said, "Behold, your sister-in-law," she says, Naomi says to Ruth, "Behold, your sister-in-law, Orpah, has gone back to her people and her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. Just go." But Ruth said, "Huh." In 1988, Gretzky said to, on live TV, he says when he gets traded, he says, "I promised Mess I wouldn't do this." Does anybody remember that when Wayne Gretzky gets traded? I can't believe I just quoted the Edmonton Oilers, but anyways, I promised myself I wouldn't do this, but it's okay. Anyways, that's besides the point. Okay. So things got really, really real, and Ruth says to Naomi, "Do not plead with me to leave you or turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you sleep, I will sleep. Where your people shall be my people. Remember, she's not from Israel. She's from Moab. She's a foreigner. Your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so with me, and worse, if anything but death separates me from you. When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined, Hebrew word is bold, to go with her, she stopped speaking about it. Have you ever been in those conversations where things got real? Not contentious, but like just real. The fluff was gone. And there's that opportunity to take a risk, conversational risk. Life is full of risks, isn't it? Like we heard about the boat going out to the Grand Banks. We heard about Doug Flutie's. You might have, life is full of risks. Huge, small. In this conversation, there was risk. It was a relational risk. Naomi bears her soul. That can be a scary spot. There's this vulnerability void. And what does Ruth do when she sees her mother-in-law with this void? She fills it with words and action. She fills it with love. Ruth is the last one standing. She shows up. Question to ask yourself, and I'm not looking for you to voice it. Who is that person in your life that God has put in your side, put by your side, and you know that person's not leaving? That's a gift. That's just a gift. Verse 19. So they both went. They both went on until they came to Bethlehem. And they had come to Bethlehem, and all the city was stirred because of them. And the woman said, "Is this Naomi?" But she said to them, "Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me?" Often, not all the times, but sometimes when life crumbles, people often go to a place of safety. Like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm speaking out of experience, but sometimes people will go home or they'll go to a place of safety. Safety is a good thing. So they came home. They were the talk of the town. What's interesting here is, and maybe this is foreshadowing to a possible time of the rest of the story being told, but this word Mara is actually in reference to when Moses threw a piece of wood into the bitter water and it became sweet. The rest of the story is sweet. And I hope to say that this is a foreshadowing that the rest of this book is full of redemption. And this morning I'm not going to get into that. There's a couple more things I want to share that I felt very strongly to share. Not often I use language like that, but that's the case this morning. Verse 22, and we'll wrap up chapter 1. So Naomi returned with Ruth, and they returned to the land, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the harvest. Some concluding thoughts to this chapter 1. How does one move on in grief and loss and tragedy? How do you trust in life? How do you trust this life? How do you trust in God Almighty? I've been asking myself that a lot, especially in the last 3 years. So, the last few months, and just reading over this chapter and reading over some things online, like John Hopkins and medical, and it was like three things, including this one chapter, kind of converged together. And that was Lamentations chapter 3, which I loved that we sang, and it was shared this morning. One thing to consider is, so how do we move on? According to John Hopkins medicine and what we're going to hear later here in Ruth, and what Ruth did was be available. And I know some of you are very, very available for those in this room. Sometimes people who are in the middle of loss, sometimes they don't want to talk. They'll put up walls. I confess I'm one that's done that. But sometimes people just want you to be there. And Ruth did this. She was present. Another thing that I've read and also that we've seen here is in Ruth, and that's let the grieving person express their emotions. Naomi did that. She expressed her heart that she felt God was against her in this. But Ruth didn't correct. She stayed. She listened. We don't know that if she continued on the conversation, but according to what we've read, she listened. Then the other thing that came together in preparing for this was a few weeks ago, just trying to think of the timeline, just shortly after my uncle died, who was like a father to me, and I woke up to the song, not reading Lamentations, but I woke up to this lyric, and it was, new every morning, great is your faithfulness, O Lord, great is... So, grabbed my coffee, went downstairs, and thought, I should open up. I felt compelled to read Lamentations. I did not connect these two together at all. I give you my word, not at all. And there, in chapter 3, was that song. I'm like, okay, God, that's cool. You were with me at this moment. So I read it. And in this message, I want to share how in chapter 1 of Ruth and in Lamentations 3, how, yes, there are some things here, insightful things that we can do in that middle of that loss, or as maybe you're with someone, you can help them. In this book, Lamentations, especially chapter 3, is filled with expressions of loss and grief. Like I said earlier, it was written after the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem, their temple, their home, their place of worship, their home. It was catastrophic. One scholar kind of captured the book of Lamentations, and I loved it. And it kind of goes back to our word of trust for the year. Lamentations is like their prayer and pain that leads to trust. I felt that really spoke to me. I felt that was really beautiful. So, Lamentations 3. And I'll insert some of my thoughts in it as kind of a conclusion to this morning. Remember my impoverished. This is Lamentations 3, 19 to 26. Remember my impoverished and homeless condition. God, remember the condition of where I'm at, which is bitter poison. I continually think about this. Sometimes those thoughts are cyclical. Maybe some of you haven't experienced that. Maybe some of you have. And I'm depressed. I'm down. But I call this to mind. Therefore, I have hope. What are you going to call to mind? And that's this. The Lord is loyal in kindness. Never ceases. His compassions never end. There are many stories in this room of this, and I can testify to this as well. They are fresh every morning. I don't know about you, but if you like baked bread and that smell, I was thinking about my mother-in-law's baked bread and the excitement of when this bread comes in and it's fresh. It's fresh every morning like baked bread. Your faithfulness is abundant, not skimpy. It's abundant. My portion is in the Lord. I've said it to myself. Maybe you just need to say it out loud and say it to yourself. My portion is the Lord right now as I share this message. And I will put my hope in him. The Lord is good to those who trust him. You ever asked maybe a believer that is advanced in years? Think about my parents. They've been going through some very, very difficult times. And then my dad will start talking and say, but the Lord is this, Ryan. The Lord is this. So, the Lord is good to those who trust in him, to those who seek him. My encouragement is continue to seek him. Even in the times of waiting, it is good to wait patiently for the deliverance of the Lord. Now, to summarize what you've heard, I've shared a bit of Ruth, Lamentations, some things of the medical profession. I'm going to summarize it in this, and then, Martin, if it's okay for you to, wonderful, play a song. How do we trust? Take a risk on God. He's worth it. Naomi did. She did it with the help of her mother or her daughter-in-law, Ruth. Find someone like Ruth. Maybe you're a Ruth in this room, and you have a Naomi in your life. Maybe you're a Naomi, and you know of a Ruth in your life. Do what Ruth did. Speak truth. Allow that person to express their pain. I'm very, very fortunate to be in a part of a community group for quite a few years. And this is my plug for community groups, find one, find a community. It has helped. It has helped me in my life. A couple more points. Don't give up. Don't give up. They continue to surge on. If you need help, ask for help. Call to mind the good times if you can. Call to mind those times where God showed up for you, where he did show up for you. And in this Lamentations 3, it talks about characteristics of who God is. Who is the Lord? And I'm going to end with this, and I can testify. The Lord is good. He is kind. He gives. He is present. And he is generous. Thank you for letting me share, for allowing me to have space to grieve in this place here. Thank you for those that came to us. And I just want to say thanks that you've been examples to me and showing me a lot of who Christ is and being living examples of Naomi and Ruth. And I don't want this to be a downer, but he is present. And read the rest of Ruth. I don't know if there's going to be another time to continue on with this story, but it's a fantastic story, and you're fantastic. Blessings to you.